Good evening, my friends. We're going to wait a few minutes for everyone else to join us. Summer has arrived. The winds are blowing on the prairies. The corn and the beans are dancing, and they're growing like crazy. The heat has definitely come upon us, and we are praying now that we get rains to continue to help the crops to grow. It is a wonderful day, and I hope that you are having a blessed day as well. Some of you may have figured out that, or know that, apparently when you're on Facebook Live now, I can't see comments or you waving and those kind of things, which is kind of bummer for me. I can when we get through the evening, and I have fun coming back and looking at those comments or those highs, kind of things. It's kind of fun for me to be able to look at that after we're through. I guess maybe it's a little bit of a, maybe it was a little bit of a distraction to have things popping up. I don't know if that's why they took that off of that function off of there, but it's not there now. So if anyone wonders why I'm not waving or I'm not acknowledging you, it's because I really don't know who's there. I just know that we are an amazing group of people to be able to gather on Wednesday evenings and have this time together. And I know I have so enjoyed, and I have a hard time believing this study's about to wrap up. We'll have one more week of this one, and then we're gonna actually kind of go back to the beginning. We've had some time to look at, we've looked at Vashti and Esther, and now we've had time to look at these 7 words of Christ after his death and kind of see where the mission field is maybe taking us. But we're gonna go back to the very beginning. We're gonna go back to Genesis. So starting in July, we're gonna do a study through, and we are really gonna walk chapter to chapter through Genesis and see how that story plays out in this day and time. And the story of Genesis is maybe an old story, but it's not old. It is a new story for you and me to unpack in our lives and see how does that first, in the beginning, when things were created from nothing to what we have, what's our role in that? So I think it's going to be kind of fun to go back to that place and begin again. And it'll take us probably quite a few weeks to walk through Genesis. We're not going to be in a hurry. We're going to read and take our time and just understand what's God trying to say. What was he saying to us then? But maybe more importantly, what's he saying to us now to do with that information? Because he has got a plan, and he's got a plan that we've seen lived out in, as we told the story of Esther and how Esther's story plays out in our lives. And now we've been walking through these 7 next words of Christ and seeing that the words were very personal in the first 4 weeks that we talked. And who are you looking for? And what are you fearing? What do you want? What are you looking for? The peace that was given to the disciples. And then they were sent finally out to go. And now, this week, we'll start that in a minute. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes and see what other friends join us. This is such a special time. I really do look forward to this each week as I plan my week and how I want the week to look, you friends have become very important in that story. I have marveled at how these lessons have wrapped into the Sunday, though, and each week, I guess God had a better plan for how we were going to decide, and I have to say it's kind of a random deciding on which Bible study to pull out and do. And I think that as much as the pandemic and the corona has messed things up for us in many of our lives, and we've kind of done and now what? I think I'm saying, right, and now what, God? What's your plan? What do you have us do next? And I keep letting him rest on my heart to help guide and direct, because this is a confusing time in our world. I shared with the council last night at church that it's been a frustrating month to have to deal with and to think about, and how is our community impacted from both the virus, which we've had no cases tested and reported in our county, but it's an unusuality. Well, that's not quite the right word, but it's an anomaly. And yet, all the social issues that are rising, and and today when we're gonna see new marketing for Aunt Jemima syrup and pancakes, and Uncle Ben's rice is going to be repackaged, and we're in a culture and in a time that I think we're struggling to know, where are we at? What are we doing? How do we do it? What's next, God? I think we're all asking. And it's been a month that I've pondered that on, and it's been a hard month to think through what, God, is next. What do you want us to do? Where do you want me to be? Where do you want me to speak words of peace or calm to a country that's hurting? How, God, do you want your servants to step forward when we're not sure what we're doing, where we're going? How do you do it right? What do we do when someone has been offended? How do I say, you're still a child of God? We all are children of God, called and then sent, just like the disciples, to go to do. Well, I think we will go ahead and pray and begin our time, and others will join us as we go through our time. But let's pause and pray. Dear God, your encounter with Peter reminds us that our worship of you ought to flow into service to others. We do love you, and we delight to communicate this love in prayer and song. But you have said that if we love you, if we will obey you, your commandments, what have you commanded? That we love our sisters and brothers. So as we worship you with all our hearts, our soul, our mind, and our strength, may we also love those whom you love. Let our love for you spill over into service to all your people. God, we ask this in your name this night. Amen. Okay, open up your Bibles. It's time to start reading in John chapter 21. John 21. I feel like I have some food caught in a tooth. I don't like that feeling. I don't know about you. It's an annoyance and it makes me uncomfortable. Maybe that's how the word makes us sometimes too. It's maybe a little uncomfortable. Maybe we are being convicted. So let's go look at our Bibles. John 21, we're going to look at verses 1 through 23. And these are familiar verses. This is not a new text for us, for you. For most of us have heard this over and over. And this one, and then we're going to look at Luke too, Luke as well. And we're going to do a little comparison because there's something unique that happens between these two texts. So John 21, verse 1. Afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. Now remember though, this is after the resurrection. Jesus has already appeared once in the locked room to the disciples. This is the second appearance that Jesus has had to the disciples. Okay. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off. And he jumped into the water. And the other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not too far from shore, maybe about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire burning coals, and there were fish on it, and some bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish you have just caught. Okay, Jesus already has fish laying there, but he brings some more on over. And Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. Even with so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. None of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. But Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the 3rd time Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. I apologize. I said it was only the 2nd. This is the 3rd time that he's come, because it was at the grave, it was in the room, and now here. Verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, I love this part. I love it. Do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. And again Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And so Jesus says, take care of my sheep. The 3rd time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus had asked him the 3rd time now, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw that the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at supper and had said, "Lord, who is going to betray you?" And when Peter saw him, he asked, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." Because of this, the rumor spread among the brothers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if you want him to remain alive, that if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? Okay. There is a ton of stuff. Way more than we're going to get covered in one evening. I hate to tell you. This reading just has so much packed into it. Maybe you can tell I kind of like this reading just a little bit. I am passionate about what it tells us about God's people and about what we are to do. Peter cracks me up. Peter cracks me up because he doesn't even really know for sure that it's Jesus. But he's pretty sure that it is. And so he wraps his cloak around him and jumps into the water and swims. Now the others are probably going, "What, you dingbat, what are you doing? We're going to take the boat and go into shore too. And we got all these fish anyway. You know, we got 153 of them." Now, for John, that was important to put in here. There were 153 fish. 153. There really isn't a lot of significance to the number. It's just the sheer fact that for him, it was important. So Peter jumps out and he runs. Well, then, did you notice, though, that when they get the boat in, Simon Peter climbed aboard and dragged the net to shore? So after Simon has now swam into shore, he climbs back in the boat so he can drag the net up to the shore. I don't know. Why did he do such a silly thing? Why did he do that? I don't know. We really don't know why he did it. What I know is that Peter heard Jesus' voice and recognized it. He knew that it was the Lord and Savior. He knew without knowing that was the Lord and Savior, the one who had come and was now back to see them again. I want you to mark your place. We're not going to go very far. I want us to go over to Luke 5. Luke 5. Verses 1 to 11. Luke 5, verses 1 to 11. And it's the other boat and the calling of the first disciples. It is one we know too, and used often in the lectionary. Well, every year Luke comes around, it's used on year C of the lectionary. One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge two boats. left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon. Not surprising that he chose Simon's boat. And asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed. Very much the same reading. John does a little bit of extra detail. I find it fascinating, the 153 fish. I don't know why, but that just catches my imagination as to that number being significant to John, that he had to count the fish. Maybe it's significant only in how do we count the disciples that you and me have intersected. And maybe those children we needed to share the story of God with. I don't know. I do think I also, though, find it fascinating that they gathered around a fire. Now, I don't know. I love to camp. Not in a tent. Now, I've done years of tenting, and I'm no longer a tent camper. I've done it. I either went in a cabin or the local Holiday Inn works really well. But I love being at campfires because there's something about watching and letting the imagination maybe go a little bit. It's a great time to tell stories. And it's stories that are both maybe true and maybe untrue. Maybe they're lived life stories of childhood. I think about the stories that my grandma and grandpa used to tell us, or my mom and dad, especially in the winter when they had to go to school and walk uphill both ways 10 miles. They did not have to walk uphill both ways, and they didn't have to walk 10 miles. And we laugh over those stories. And we laugh and chuckle as many of us as parents, we tell the same stories. Maybe it is our favorite Bible stories that we want to tell and retell. For me, Esther's pretty much up there on that list. Noah. How a man listened, but also to Adam and Eve, to Ruth and Boaz, to Naomi, to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, and their different understandings, and yet for many events they were there at the same time, and they're only telling it from their perspective. But isn't that what a story is? It's either a life journey that we're making, and it is telling it from our perspective, or it is the remembering of from childhood. See, I remember many camping trips with my grandma and grandpa. Grandma and Grandpa Johnson were avid campers. And we're talking about back in the 60s and 70s, after Grandpa had retired from the railroad. They would leave every summer, every spring, and they would be gone for 4, 5, 6 months, camping in a tent out of their car with a Coleman stove, hauling water, and Grandma hated camping. But she went every year, as Grandpa wanted to see this great land that we live in. He took thousands and thousands of photographs. He painted probably over 100 pictures of this great land that we call America. He loved, but he told us the stories. And on those camping trips, so we went with them, and we got to go fishing down to Roaring River in Missouri, or we went up to Minnesota and sat around the campfire telling the stories. We burnt a lot of marshmallows that never made it to a s'more. We laughed. We played marbles. We had time together. And we got to see God's creation in the midst of it. I think that's what Jesus was doing that day. I think Jesus needed a final time with his disciples to sit and tell the stories again. The stories that are lived now for you and me. And it is our faith stories that we need to sit around the campfire and maybe tell more often. It is the stories of our lives that embrace and bring people in to our journey. But after I get through the fact that they were sitting there and Jesus wanting to go deeper in faith around that campfire. You know, when I look at campfires and all the hundreds I've been to in campfire rings with Boy Scouts and that kind of thing, you know, I love watching the wafting of the smoke. And we waft and let the prayers of the people rise with that smoke. We let our dreams and our hopes go to the God of creation and have him take away our cares and our concerns. I've sat around many of those fires with young men and young women, soul searching, for them to ponder and wonder what's next. I sat around one night with a young lad that was a Hopi Indian, talking about the great Creator, the great Spirit. Oh, the power of that fire, the power of what that unleashes in us, the power of that smoke, acting as incense in many ways and rising aloft and carrying our concerns with us. Doesn't sound like a bad idea, does it? But the next part of this that I love, it's really kind of, I think, for Peter, probably a very annoying time, because starting with verse 15, he gets we've got Jesus. This is a very one-to-one conversation. There is no one else involved in this conversation between Peter and Jesus. This is one-to-one, in your face with Jesus. Can you imagine? And Jesus just looks flat out at him and says, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than any of these? Do you love me more than any of these your brothers? I don't know. I think if Jesus had done that, I'd have probably gone, huh? Why are you asking that question? And it's kind of the, oh yeah, you know that I do, Lord. Come on. The fascinating part, and maybe the part that if we're going to underline, and anyone who knows me knows my Bible is totally underlined and highlighted and marked in different colors, I would underline, feed my lambs. We're going to see a progression with this. This one really kind of just struck me. Outside of the smoke and the campfire thing that I truly love. But, feed my lambs. Lambs are babies. They're young'uns. They're younglings. They are not grown yet. They're young ones. Well, then he asks a second time, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? Now, I don't know whether Peter would have started getting a little annoyed, and he's like, well, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus says, take care of my sheep. Take care of my sheep. We're on a journey, friends. Lambs to caring for sheep. And the third time he says, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was, and it says here, was hurt because Jesus asked him 3 times, do you love me? And he says, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Did you catch it? Did you catch what happened here? Jesus said it 3 times for a reason. He needed to prove a point. He needed Peter to understand this is a journey that we're on. Just as they were on a journey for 3 years with Jesus, he was now sending them all on a journey to find and feed my lambs, feed the younglings, bring the younglings into my fold. But then I need you to take care of them. I need you to educate them. I want you to train them. I want you to be with them. And then it's feed my sheep. Because as we age, we will not be the teachers anymore. Did you catch it? I don't know that I had until I looked at it in a different way. And then in verse 19, Jesus says, follow me. Now, Peter's misunderstanding this. He's not talking about following him to death at the moment, but to follow me in my journey. And this isn't worrying about the other dudes. The other guys are going to get their just reward or punishment. My friends, this night, the message is clear what we are to do. We are to go and share. But we have to start with those who don't know the story of Jesus at all. And we have to feed the lambs, and we have to gather them. We may have to bottle feed them for a little while because they don't know the story. We have to spend time maybe sitting around that campfire, maybe in a little bit of agape love, which is love without conditions. We have to then care for the sheep. And then we need to feed the sheep. as each of us age up. Their friendship and their depth and breadth of building a covenant was all that it's about. It's about for you and me, building the covenant, building the friendships and the relationships with those our friends, with those who are called to and placed in our lives to be led or fed. There are some that are listening who haven't been part of a community maybe for a very long time. Maybe some who have joined us have never joined a faith community. My friends, I reach out to you and say, that's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for. It's about feeding my sheep, gathering them so that we can give nectar and honey. It is about building those relationships that we can be church together. That then as we care for each other, as we mature a little bit in our faith, and as we start to grow and become witnesses for each other, that we can mentor the next group, and then we feed our sheep. See, I think that what happens in worship, I love coming to worship. I love going to worship. I love it. It's not the same right now. But you know what? I'm not unhappy because we still get to come together as God's family. Whether we are coming by way of Facebook Live or whether we're in person, we are still God's body called together, and there's energy and there's excitement. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, God's story is being played out and lived out. I think there's so many things we can say about this lesson. I think the takeaways that I want you to think about when you think about these lessons, this lesson especially, is maybe that it is time to tell a story. A successful story. Maybe we need to tell the positives because there's so much negative in our world. Maybe it is find that campfire to sit around. Or maybe we need to go fishing. Fishing and looking for those who need the story and need us to hold them in telling their story. I want to read this one story to you very quickly. This pastor is talking about, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to tell you what it is. The pastor's at a church, and in fact, for my people, it could come to life, because I'm really thinking about it. They were talking about the come to the table, about the Last Supper. And he'd been at a revival, and he had, people staged to come to the table and fill it up with all the disciples. And with the fine china and the silver and everything and glorious. And he placed the people at the table that he wanted. There was only one problem. As he started to have people come to the table, he realized that his preconceived selections were not complete. He realized what he had done was put everyone who looked the same at that table. He had the table filled with his people, and a voice comes up behind him and says, "No, the table's not complete yet, preacher." It was a middle-aged African American who who was making his way towards the table because he had not been included. You can imagine what might happen. The beauty was one of the people that was already sitting at the table got up. Another person got up that had leg braces on. He said, "I'm not there." They made room for him at the table. A young girl who got up, who had been pregnant at 16. Talk of the town, because she was one of those girls. She went and found a seat at the table as well. One by one they came until the table was full and actually spilled over. There were well over 12. I wonder if that's not the table God wants for you and me to be sitting at when we're in worship. The table that's full and abounding, that takes all the barriers down, just like Jesus did, sitting on the shore. Sitting on the shore at that campfire. Heartfelt stories. Heartfelt lives. For you and me, come to the table. Come to the table each week that we gather for worship. Come to the table each Wednesday when we gather for Bible study. Come to the table, my friends, because this is the place we gather with our hurts and our pains, our discomforts and our anxieties. We come to the table in His name. My friends, our time has come to a close. I pray for you to have a blessed week as we continue through this week. Stay safe, stay cool, and mostly I hope to see each of you on Sunday morning. God's peace. Amen.